Good morning, Deirdre.
Good morning, Tom. How are you today?
Beautiful. It's great.
Yeah.
Nice and bright and sunny. And
And
actually, I hate to say this, but it's absolutely perfect. It's like 70 degrees here, 15% humidity, sun shining. Are there any things called clouds that exist? Have you ever seen anything called clouds?
every day here in New England. But I've got to say, in your tulip field, there aren't many clouds and it's all beautiful.
There aren't many, that is for sure. That is for sure. So, we're talking about introducing AI into a company, Deirdre.
Correct.
And how do you introduce it? And meaning not in productivity terms, as we both know, it's being heavily used by almost every company in many, many ways. We're talking about introducing it at the senior team level for their constant use to help them in doing their job every single day. So why don't you introduce this in a little bit more detail?
All right. This video is 73-1B. We are in our 73 series where we're really talking about becoming a transitional leader, bringing AI to your organization. We're in the part of the series where we have a discussion going between the board chair and the CEO. And in our previous video, we were talking about this is a new CEO and what the new CEO brings to the scenario in terms of enthusiasm and knowledge and willingness to move ahead. But we still identified problems with the board of directors and with the senior management team. And this is a second conversation between the board chair and the CEO, where we're actually discussing what we're going to talk about as we bring AI more to the board and to the management team. Some concepts that need to be introduced when we're talking about AI. And in those terms, I'm going to read a paragraph from a newsletter that I read this morning. This is the e-newsletter called The Algorithm from the MIT Tech Review. And it was talking about the gap in perception of AI between experts and non-experts. It says that assessing AI's impact on jobs, 73% of US experts are positive, compared with only 23% of the public. This is a massive break here. This is a 50% difference between the experts and the general public. The newsletter went on to say that by and large, this difference in perception has to do with the types of work that both experts and then the general public were thinking about when thinking about AI. And the newsletter says this means that people who use those tools for coding or other technical work are experiencing this technology at its best. Outside of those use cases, you get more of a mixed bag. LLMs make some dumb mistakes. This phenomenon has become known as the jagged frontier. Models are very good at doing some things and less good at doing other things. What this means is that for my management team, maybe the CTO, maybe the CIO are experiencing these models, AI models, at their best, doing the technology-driven tasks, doing coding, and that sort of work. Well, if anyone else on my management team has been playing around with the models, they're seeing the jagged edge, they're seeing the downside, and they're not getting good results. This is important when we're bringing AI to the board and the management team because the conversations have to be different. What I discuss when I'm talking with the management team, what I discuss for the CTO and CIO is going to be different when I discuss this for the rest of the team. The same with the board. There are some people on the board who know the technology, who have seen the technology uses, but others on the board are saying, what the heck? We're going to be turning our company into a company that uses this stuff, that hallucinates, that provides bad results, that does all of this stuff. So this difference in perception is a very important concept when bringing AI to the board and the management team. And with that, Tom, do you want to talk about the main concepts that are involved here?
Yes, we're what we're talking about when we talk about this, and I know that again, we don't want to mislead anybody. We know that every company, probably almost everybody, is using AI for something. What we're talking about is using it for what you and I call, Deirdre, complex work. It's called complex senior work, work beyond what many people do, which is what you labeled early on as productivity work, which is rightly named productivity work, or advanced productivity work. Uh, we're going to be talking about two fundamental things. One is in order to use these things for what you and I would use them for um, top level leadership of almost anything, or for um, even oversight work, right?
Right.
So it's not just the leadership work, but the oversight work of anything. To do those things well, the best, not the best, but one of the more productive ways to think about it is as a horizontal capability, not a vertical capability. Most of what you and I see people doing with artificial intelligence, LLMs, and so forth is a lot of vertical work. Write something for me, research something for me. Even me today, do research and give me a quick summary of it. That's incredibly helpful, incredibly powerful, and we certainly use that almost every day ourselves. Where there's another layer of leverage, another layer of power, and what you and I say, when you combine it with that ability to do incredibly good deep work this way, you combine it with this thing we call synthesis, or you could call it, which we also call it, which is an insight layer. It's a horizontal insight layer. It's a and one could think of it as exposing the benefits of doing that, which is usually very hard because this is where you're integrating things. So you could have done a lot of these very deep pieces of work, such as a researcher does, and then a researcher would have to lay it out on a table and try to make sense of it, or lay it out on a spreadsheet, or lay it out on your desktop. Well, this thing will do that work for you, and
Right.
then provide that ability to what you and I call synthesize it, pull it together in a smart way, provide that cognitive layer that does that. That's incredibly powerful. And especially when you combine that with the horizontal thinking, where you're now able to go out to the marketplace, for example, and pull information from the marketplace and match it against this horizontal view of your business, this view that takes the business as a whole and looks at everything going on. That horizontal thinking is that key. You can't. Most of us have gotten where we are. You, me, most everybody has gotten where they are because they've established some form of credibility in what you and I call vertical capabilities, functional skill, functional expertise.
Right.
Um, and we've done that. You have a couple of them in your back. Actually, you have a number of those, more than most,
That's
Deirdre.
right.
But some of us have, we've got a little bit of tech, but a lot of finance or whatever. Um, but the that's how we've made our name. That's how we got to doing what we're doing. And then you layer on top of that capabilities, project management capabilities, leadership capabilities, and relationship capabilities, human interaction. Those things then give you that ability to rise up and do things that are a little more complex. And especially
Right.
if some of the capabilities require physical attributes that go along with that, it becomes
Right.
even more interesting. Wonderful professions. Today, you and I think that's kind of changing. we think that in order to play in the future world, you actually have to develop this whole thing that you and I have a name for. So I'm going to let you look like you're raring to go to take this one on because you've been working about this for a while.
I've been thinking about it for a while, absolutely. The important point to make here is that in this AI insight layer is data. Data picked up from the verticals and applied horizontally. That in the old time corporations, in the industrial age, data was siloed. And data was actually held very tightly by people in their silos. They wouldn't release their data to the disadvantage of the corporation. What we're talking about an AI layer captures data from all of the different functional areas. So it's no longer siloed, it's available for use, and it allows broader analysis and interpretation of what's going on. So that when, as you mentioned earlier, we collect data from the marketplace and compare it to the data in our AI insight layer, completely different interpretations, completely different ideas, insights arise from this comparison of the more complete data. You and I sometimes refer to the availability of the data in this layer as the next term you're going to talk about, which is the value chain, which is, of course, different for a board of directors and for a management team. So back to you, Tom, to
Oh,
handle value chain.
I thought you were going to give me another break here. Um, so the value chain, and those of you who have we've had the privilege of teaching you in at Columbia, or others who have attended a business school program to do an MBA or business education, you're familiar with the concept of a value chain. Now, you may have been you may have seen that related to Michael Porter, a famous professor at Harvard. I think he was at Harvard, right, Deirdre?
Harvard, yes.
Harvard, in strategy. And one of the things he did was wrote a book, a famous book that was in my curriculum in graduate school, and I know it was yours too at Stanford,
Mhm.
Deirdre, where you talked about actually not at Stanford, yours was at Columbia.
At
So
Columbia, his book on
you were
competitive
studying Aristotle and stuff when you were at in Stanford,
Stanford.
but
That's right. But Porter's competitive strategy was at
Mhm.
Columbia in the MBA program.
It was, and it talked about this concept called value chain, which was a horizontal look at value in your
Right.
organization. And how do you create value? And it's not you don't just create it in product or in some aspect of your product or in marketing. It's the actual combination of this, and it flowed from things to things. And so it was this horizontal view of the business. It was very difficult to make real. It was easy to conceive, and you could draw it on the board, and there were a lot of attempts at doing measures of value chain. Usually, it had to be done by a consultant because you had to pull this data together. It was very hard to do because the data, just like all these things, the data didn't match from organization to organization, sometimes even within organizations. And sometimes you didn't even collect the data in a way that would allow it to match and be relevant one comparison to the other. So it was just something you could do. You'd had to do a lot of estimating and so forth, and it was a one-time thing. With what's available to you today with an AI insight layer, you can see a value chain. You can see your value chains, and it's not hard. And you don't need to change a lot to be able to see it. And to collect that data and have the insight layer synthesize that and give you meaningful answers. And where it really becomes valuable is not just what it can do for you and your company, but to tell you how that compares to what exists in your competitive marketplace. That's where the real value is. So it's
Correct.
not just that it can do it in your company, but that it can give you the comparison data.
Right.
And we see this in what you and I do now every day, Deirdre. We're always looking at how does it connect to the market. I did a
Correct.
piece of work, as you know, You and I were doing something, what was this, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago? We did a market comparison work of a product of a friend of ours, an entrepreneur, one of his companies, comparing his product of one of his companies with what's going on in the marketplace and its comparison and so forth. And we were helping him try to reframe their
Their
this.
sales approach. Yes.
Yeah, and it was the target. First of all, it was really targeting who to target, right? They
Right.
were targeting, instead of targeting the actual decision maker who was at the very top of the business, they were targeting a little bit too low.
Right.
And as a result, it wasn't resonating well what they were doing. And they needed to not only target up, but change the message. And the beauty was they had all the information up and a winning result when you got it done. But we did a pretty extensive look at their marketplace just because we could, not that we're expert at doing this sort of thing. And then I redid part of it early this morning for a different reason. I wanted to show them something else, and I found the market had changed. Two
Yes.
companies had introduced competing products from important competitors. Now, fortunately, the products don't look like they're going to cause any serious competition, but in 2 weeks, we now have two major competitors who announced products that we didn't have visibility to 2 weeks ago.
That's the business world today.
Yeah.
And this is what we constantly talk about in terms of keeping your mindset fresh, keeping everything on your radar screen absolutely up to date, because things are changing by the day, by the hour, sometimes in some fields. And I think the whole concept of the thinking across, the horizontal thinking, the value chain concept, the AI insight layer concept are all aimed at collecting whatever is happening when it is happening to make sure that you're making your decisions, exercising your leadership work in the most up-to-date and appropriate way. And this is what we want to bring to the company in our scenario as
Yes,
well.
it probably, and the thing I failed to say in this, and as Deirdre knows, I've been going for 8 hours already today. And so I'm losing a little bit of edge here. But the point I was trying to make on this, not to belabor it too much, but it's that outside view. And what I was doing today was sharpening on that particular point, and it mattered that two of their biggest competitors had announced a competing product where they didn't have a competing product 2 weeks ago. And so it changed, not tremendously, but it changed a little bit of what I was doing today. Let me also clear up. You and I don't generally do this kind of work. We don't do consulting work. I'm doing this. Why are we doing this? We're doing this for the reason we're doing this podcast. We're trying to show this entrepreneur and their leadership team how this stuff, if we can do it, they can do it.
Right.
And if now you and I are doing this because they're friends of ours and not just friends of ours, they're business colleagues first, but they're also, well, everybody we deal with eventually becomes our friend, we hope. But we're trying to introduce the use of these capabilities to them and get them to see that it's no longer about just the instincts they have about the market based on all the collection material, things they read, materials they get, white papers they read, that you literally can turn on your machine today, connect, and see what the market is doing, just like a stock trader does
Mhm.
and has for a long time. And that way of thinking that says, I've got to connect my vertical company here. I not only have to connect it to the marketplace in as hard a way as I can, but I can do it easily now, where I haven't been able to do that very easily before. You had to hire experts who had that ability to do that, and even they had to work hard at it, or do have to work hard at it.
And this leads us directly to the fourth major concept here, Tom. Do you want
In
to?
our introduction, Deirdre,
Uh,
that's
this
been going on for 20 minutes, that I've carried out for 20 minutes.
well, these are important concepts because what we're really talking about here is a different way of thinking, a different way of approaching work. And we call this a 50-50 split between the traditional functional expertise and what we call work fluency. That no longer, certainly for leadership and at any layer of leadership, but likely for anyone in an organization, you can no longer develop a functional expertise alone. Although, believe me, you do have to have a functional expertise and be pretty darn good at it. What you also have to develop is a fluency in this new way of working, in this new way of understanding not only how to use the tools, AI models, other forms of AI, other forms of technology, and so forth, but also understand the concept of the value chain across functions, the AI insight layer generating insights for you, the the whole concept of this horizontal thinking. No longer can you just be satisfied to sit in a functional area. If you are to deliver value for your company, you need to get up at the layer of the value chain. You can no longer simply use AI models to do work the way you have been doing work. And that's the way most people are using these models these days anyway, for a simple search or to compose a letter or maybe to combine documents. That's simply extending work into through the use of a new tool. It's getting up there and doing this work at the level of the horizontal value chain, the AI insight layer, and capturing the data across all of the silos in order to generate results that truly, truly provide value for the firm and generate the insights that lead to higher levels of productivity and success in the marketplace. So when we're talking about work fluency, we're not simply talking about knowing how to use a tool. You've got to know how to use a tool or use the multiple tools. It's developing your mindset into a new way of capturing data and insights to elevate your work at a cross-functional, horizontal level for your organization, so that you generate better results. That's what's expected of leaders these days. No longer can, for example, a chief marketing officer simply function in marketing. They need to capture what's happening across the firm. The same for the CFO, the chief salesperson, the chief human resources person. All of these people cannot rely on simply doing reports or doing their work within their functional areas. They have to come up and operate at a value chain level across all functions for the entire firm. And now, going back to our scenario, Tom, where you're the
Darn,
board chair.
you're gonna make me really work here, Deirdre. I
I'm going to
can't.
make you work here, Tom.
Okay.
Getting to our scenario. Introduction's over now. Getting into our
Okay.
scenario.
So you know what? I think we should let's just put the characters aside and let's just talk about it from the point of view of our roles. So because you're going to probably tell me, look, you're supposed to be the board chair. You need to tell me, because you're the CEO, right? You're going to say, okay, Tom, tell me how you're going to do this at the board level.
Tom, how are you going to do this at the board level?
Right. I don't know, Deirdre. How are you going to do it at the company level?
Let me give you some
Okay.
ideas because I've thought about
Good.
this.
Good. I'm tired. I'm going to have some more coffee here from yesterday. This is
Okay.
left over from yesterday.
Okay. I'm the CEO, the new CEO brought in here. I have a track record in being a transformational leader in terms of bringing AI to a company. I've talked with all of the people on my management team, and by and large, good group of people, top level expertise in their function, but I question whether some of them, most of them, frankly, actually can become the leaders who operate at the cross-functional value chain level that I need in this organization. This ties back to the quote I was reading earlier from The Algorithm. That is the MIT Tech Review magazine, Tech Review newsletter, talking about how people like me who understand the technology and have been using the technology at a high level have to recognize that people who don't have that experience are not thinking in the same way we are. So my job in bringing my management team up to the level of functioning at the horizontal thinking, AI insight layer, the value chain level, and so forth, involves not only reframing their understanding of the technology, but also developing the work fluency in addition to their functional capability.
Yeah.
For example, one of my prime people is my CFO, a longtime employee who is a terrific CFO who doesn't really think this AI stuff contributes value beyond being a tool that maybe some of the lower level people in the organization work. What his attitude means is that he does not have access to the value chain level. So that if I bring to him a problem like our net margin is dropping, how do we fix this problem? He's going to answer in a functional area as opposed to tapping into the data available to him from across the whole value chain. And this is a problem because his answer is going to be what I call industrial age, as opposed to the age of AI.
By the
So
way, Deirdre, that's a perfect way to characterize it because it's not that he won't get data. He's going to get data that they've been using to justify and to solidify the functional aspects of both of the areas or all of the areas. So it's not going to be that comprehensive view that you're talking about. It's not going to be the equivalent of what we've done when we tried to mimic a value chain. And any of those, just so that we can decode this for people that have studied with you and me at Columbia, that is the way we look at it when we do financial modeling. We look at what's called value chains. We don't call it that, but that's what we you build a financial model. It's really not a financial model. It's a model of the value chains within the business. And that's why financial modeling, as we teach it and as Ken taught it, is such a difficult concept to get your head around as opposed to just pure budgeting. And
it's
what
not budgeting, it's cash flow in addition to value chain.
but your point about this is the same, right? It's this point that says, look, when if in order for me to get my management team, let's say in this particular example, the CFO, to think about the business in a value chain like way, I'm going to introduce a problem of perhaps margin and say, how can I look at it across all functions in the meaningful way of how they contribute to the margin in the first place? And where can I see the issue in that view rather than looking at it in the financial view?
Absolutely. And let me bring up an issue related to a CFO, which is pertinent here. And then I'm going to talk about three problems and how I proceed with introducing these problems to my entire management team. The problem is, and this is very apropos to the way our discussion is evolving here, is that traditionally in industrial age companies, the CFO owned the metrics for the organization, and the financial metrics owned by the CFO were the measurements for the firm, for how well the firm was doing. Net profit, net margin, things like that. And a traditional CFO is going to be horrified at the idea of possibly losing control over the metrics used to measure the success of an organization when all members of the management team are tapping into different data which apply directly to the work that they are doing in their own function. In other words, and this is an issue that, you and I have talked about it for a couple of years. I'm starting to see some mentions of it in the business press, that the traditional measurements used in the industrial age are no longer appropriate for measuring the success of an AI oriented organization in the age of AI. There are different things you look at. Certainly, when you're looking at things like, well, there's a whole set of, say, social media metrics that, say, the CMO might use, which have some value or maybe not value. But there are different measurements that, say, the sales function uses in terms of profitability of different customers and so forth, outside the financial metrics and so forth. And in fact, we in our teaching talk about how each C-level person or a top manager in a function need to come up with their own metrics and then tie those metrics to this whole value chain in order to get a whole measurement of how the organization as a whole is working. Major change. But anyway, going back to how would I introduce this thinking about value chain to my management team? Let's posit a Monday morning meeting. They know I am the new CEO coming in. They have question marks in their brain about what I'm going to force them to do. They come into a room and I say, all right, we're going to start talking about horizontal thinking across a value chain using an AI layer. And all of a sudden, the CTO and the CIO are nodding. The rest of them look like deer in headlights. And what I'm going to do is introduce the concept not by having them work within their function. In fact, I think that was a problem last year when my predecessor tried to introduce the work of AI models to each of them. My predecessor said, for example, to the CFO, use this model to solve a problem in the finance function. That allowed them to operate functionally. Similarly, CMO, use this model to solve a problem in marketing. CSO, use this model to solve a sales problem. Yes, they need to know how to use these models to do work in their function, but everything has to be tied up to the value chain layer because of the availability of the data and the fact that thinking horizontally, your organization-wide solutions are going to operate at the AI insight layer, the value chain layer, not down in the silos. How does this work? Well, let me introduce a problem. And I'm introducing this to my management team in this Monday morning meeting. A new competitor has entered our marketplace. We know that, or we're guessing it, because sales are starting to drop for some of our products, and we have no answers to this. It's impacting our market share. So, how do we diagnose the problem and how do we react to it? The only way we're going to get answers is to get up in the value chain layer using AI models to do our research. And this is where getting up into this AI layer, the value chain layer, depends on the 5-step process for using these models. It starts with the research. It starts with feeding information and interacting with the research. It comes down to then me providing context. And this may be at a functional layer, but I've got to feed my functional information, sales data, for example, or market share information up into the value chain. It gets down to the model doing its synthesis, and then I get insights in the finalizing step where I need to think through what I'm getting out of the machine means in terms of providing the value exchange. And I assure everyone listening to this that the insights you're going to get are not functional. They're cross-functional, they're cross-silo, they relate to the entire value chain across the functions. And then that's how I, as a functional leader, come back next Monday morning and say, these are the insights I got from this work, and they apply across the functions.
And
That's
if you really
actually
want to be aggressive, you could literally launch it in the meeting that you're having with the team on Monday and do the research on the fly.
I could do, and actually, I think that's how this first problem gets solved because I've got two people on my management team who kind of understand this, although I bet they haven't done, given their functions, CTO and CIO, haven't used it to solve what I'll call business functions. They need to learn how to integrate the technology into the business, into solving the business issues. For the other people, I'm going to have to drive this because it's not an instinctual problem. It's not something that like a new type of competitor is entered. What type of competitor? It may be what I would think of as a natural competitor, a different type of company, or it may be a different type of solution. I don't know that until I start to tap into market research, what's happening in the marketplace, who the competitors are, what's going on out there in terms of emerging technology, what's happening when our salespeople are out there talking to customers who all of a sudden are using a different solution. These are different types of data that have to be brought up to this value chain layer in order for me working with an AI model to come up with the insights that tell me what do I do? What are my next steps to regain my market share and to address this new competition? Let me talk about a different issue which may interest the CFO more. There's an economic downturn. The markets are acting strangely. How does this affect our business? Not how does this affect your personal investments, but how does this affect our business? Or what can we do to adapt to economic conditions to save our market share, to save our profits, to deliver the returns we want, to continue to meet our goals? This is a major tapping into data across the functional areas to understand what is happening here, how this affects our business, and then how we have to up our game, to use a phrase you and I have been using in the past few videos, up our game to make sure that we continue to deliver results to satisfy all of our stakeholders.
So, Deirdre, if you stop there, one of the things that you could ask yourself is, okay, so how would a board react to
Right,
this? The question that I would want the board to question is, tell me what all the other companies that you compete with in this marketplace, what are they doing? How are they reacting to it? So not only do you what you want to know, what are you going to do, but also what is everybody else doing? And what signals can you get from all the different sources that the LLMs can research that give you an indication of what they're doing. So, example, we have a market share issue. We're losing share. We can't, for some reason, the intelligence that we're getting from our own people in the marketplace isn't clear. You don't like it. It seems a little iffy because they're saying it's a price issue. You think it might be a product issue,
right,
whatever, or a messaging issue. You're not sure. But you're down to that point of your instincts tell you something's not right.
correct.
The first thing you want to ask is, okay, what's the marketplace telling us? What do
Right,
they say about us? Right?
right,
That's what the board should be asking is not just Deirdre, what are you and the team seeing and what are your ideas, but what is the marketplace telling the world about us? How do they see us? Right? So a board should be one of the benefits. You and I talk about value change, and uh, part of the value equation, meaning, what are you giving to the marketplace, and what are you getting in return from the marketplace, and what you're getting back, you better hope is above. You better plan for it to be above what you're giving, otherwise you're not going to make any money, right?
right,
That's what we call a value exchange. One of the
right,
ways you get it is through this value chain of delivering that
correct.
to the market. Now, we call a part of the value equation is an institutional value equation, right?
Correct.
And so one of the questions you want to ask yourself is, what are you delivering as an institution to the marketplace, and what are they telling you about your institution? The board's job is to inspect and preserve that institutional value exchange. The the value that the world is placing on your company, whether that be the world of you as the complete owner because you happen to own 100% of the company, or you're a partner with others, or you're in where you're in the frame where you have owners of your company that share ownership with you, or you're a public company. But all of that, the board's job is to keep a view of that, what you and I would call the institutional value exchange that's happening with the marketplace. What's the
Right.
company delivering? What's the marketplace delivering? What you can do now as a board is you can begin to have insight into what does the market say beyond the equation. You and I have various aspects to the equation. One of those aspects is that the institutional one, what is the value of your reputation? What is the value of how the marketplace sees your ability to grow or not to grow, or to be at what stage of your industry? Are you in the forefront? Are you in the middle? Are you in behind? Which are they valuing the most these days, right?
Right.
So so that's the board's job. The beauty is now the board can have their own view of that because they can get that from this insight layer. So as a board chair, I would want to start having the board members begin to get themselves comfortable with that kind of thing. What I would propose to do, which I know is going to be your next question to me, but you've droned on so long here, Dieter. Oh my goodness. This is so much good stuff, right?
Well, there's a lot to talk about. We're
I know
actually,
it's so funny. How many times do you and I go through this? Oh, Tom, I don't think we have enough material here. It's going to be 20 minutes. We're, we're already 40 minutes. Um, but what I would say is that this changes the world for the board directors, right? And you and I keep saying,
absolutely.
we've been saying, look, the substance of the work that's going on in a company is changing. The substance of work for leaders are changing, whether you're a leader at any level, all the way up through oversight levels in the board. What that I just described, that's what's changed.
Right.
It's that being able not just to do what your instincts tell you you should do as a good board chair, or not board chair, but board director,
Right.
someone who's overseeing the value, the institutional value of the company, with all the other aspects they've got responsibility for. But now you can get your hands on that data. So if you said to me, which I would imagine you would say as the CEO, Deirdre, you would say to me, okay, Tom, as chair of the board, not chairman, but chair of the board, tell me what you do. How are you going to introduce this to the board
Right.
and get them to start seeing it? Because we could take the old institutional approach. Let's call a meeting. We'll educate. We'll tell everybody. We'll educate them. Baloney. Baloney.
Right.
As I like to say, they don't give us a a manual for this
Right.
on how to use it. And if you really want to get confused, you can get really confused at a Tesla dealership when they think you know how to drive one and they just say, "Here, go test drive it," and you go there. How do I even get this thing? Where's the start button? Um, the thing about this is, I think it's best when they see it in action.
Yes.
And so, what I would suggest is let's take a comp committee meeting. Let's say I'm on the comp committee or I'm chair of the comp committee. What I would do, Deirdre, is I'd say, send me the traditional package you're going to send me. And I'm going to then place that as in a confidential situation with the layer. So I'm going to make sure that I'm not exposing this information to the internet. But once I've done that, then I'm going to give that information provided as research information to the insight layer, to the LLM. In my case, it would likely be Grok. And so I'd give it to Grok as a piece of insight layer that's protected. I'm not going to share it with the outside my domain. What I'm going to then do is to begin asking the question, please take a look at this material, and please take a look at the agenda that's been proposed, and tell me how you evaluate it. Am I covering the right things? Do I have them in the right priority sequence? What have I left out? How would you emphasize or de-emphasize aspects of it? Are they well supported by the material? After I've read it, right, I'd go through and read it first, but then I'd want to know what the insight layer is going to tell me. That's the first thing I'd do. Tell me what I'm missing. Tell me what seems right to you, what seems not right. Now, do a complete comparison against the outside world. Tell me not only against the industry, but against my competitors. Please do a contrast and compare. How are we doing? How
Mhm.
are we doing compared to how the world is seeing us?
Mhm.
Who out there sees us? What do they say about the aspects that are relevant to a comp committee? Do a piece of work and analyze that for me. Now, reshape my agenda.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. Now, give me another piece of research information that I ought to have as a supplement to this. And then we've now got not just an inside view of this thing, Deirdre, but we have a view of what is the world doing, right? What's my industry doing? Then what are my competitors doing to the best of their ability to get that information? What is the marketplace saying about our company and its human resource aspect of this thing, right? I mean, just tell me how different. I will just assure you that is a different comp committee meeting that I'd be showing up to than one without it.
You're talking about having the 50-50 split of functional expertise and work fluency apply to the board as well as to people within the company. And I think that's right, that no longer can.
I hope so because I just finished almost, well, I think I did finish the second book in the sequence, right, that people haven't seen yet. That'll be out
Right.
later this spring, where we talk about this. Not only that, we talk about now what does that do in terms of shaping your organization. But I shouldn't stop you when you're selling for me, so please go.
Well, I'm explaining this to our listeners who haven't read your second book, even in manuscript form. But the whole idea is that so many board directors are brought onto a board for functional expertise. Oh, he knows this technology, or she knows the marketplace, or he knows that, she knows that, and so forth. But the idea is that that is a siloed approach to the board and or siloed approach by the board. And if board members are going to be responsible for the well-being of the company, they too need to start thinking in terms of the value chain, the AI layer, the access to data from outside, from across all of the functions, developing the insights as well in order to do their job as board directors. In other words, it's not just the company employees who have to up their game, it's the board of directors who need to up their game as well. Or else, think about the conversations between the board and the management team or the board and the CEO. They'd be talking about different things. The board would not be understanding the insights, the results, the goals, the work that the organization is doing in this age of AI if the board directors themselves are functioning as industrial age board directors. This is why, in our scenario, the board director, equally with the CEO, needs to bring his board up to the level of people operating at that 50-50 split.
And
And
you could see, Deirdre, how I would do that. the first thing is I'd do that first committee meeting that way.
Yep.
And then I would make sure that every other committee, we would do the same thing. And it would be
Mhm.
led by the person who's the chair of that committee. And
Absolutely.
it forces the other members either to up their game to that level or be lost.
Correct.
And this is the point that there's there we haven't we haven't really explained this in the past, but there are people who will naturally take to this that will they'll just get it right away and
Right.
start flying, right? So they'll just do it tomorrow with something.
Right.
There'll be others who will reluctantly adopt it with a little bit of help from people.
Right.
And that's what we're trying to do with our buddy is to get them because they really want to learn. They just aren't quite
Correct.
comfortable. And then there are those that just, no matter what you do, they're not going to be comfortable with this.
Right.
And that's just reality. We've seen it in every what you and I call serious changes that we call serious disruptions, market dislocations. This is a serious market dislocation that is it's a broad dislocation, as was the internet, as was the industrial age. And there are many others that go back. And it's a it's where some people feel comfortable making these changes and find, some other people just kind of they just kind of do whatever they can to do this. You know, we were talking about this today, which we'll go into a good bit deeper later. And I see you smiling because you're worried I'm going to do a student body left and be out there for 20 minutes. I promise you I'm not. But, you know, I've been doing some work on developing my own Claude skills, right? Which is basically I'm creating agents. I'm trying to understand better if we're going to talk about people using agent technology or agentic AI, what is that? And what's the
Right.
architecture like and how do you do it? And so, one of the things that it became clear to me is that yes, one of the agents I built, actually, it's not just one agent, it's three agents that I linked together in a process, right, and had a sequential process. But, and I had to build it that way because when I tried to combine it, it didn't work well. We'll get into that in another podcast. But by the way, I'm not suggesting that people like you and me do this. It's just because you and I are nerdy. We like to make sure we know what we're talking about if we're going to talk about this stuff.
That's right.
Um, I haven't gotten Deirdre down there yet, but you're getting close. I think
I'm
today
getting
I've
very
got you
close.
interested in building
Absolutely.
a few of these skills.
Right.
But it falls down here, right? My son Ken starts, and then it goes from there. He gets me going, and then I go from there. But what I would say is this, that there are going to be people that will just take to this naturally, and there'll be people that won't. What you can see though is what Deirdre essentially asked me earlier. Okay, what does this mean, right? And what I said to you, Deirdre, was, well, first of all, it means I probably won't have to spend this $1,000 to pay contractors to do this kind of work that I can have Claude do for me, right? In co-work using the agent structure I built. Now, what does it mean though? It means that I know the people, they're not just fellows, but the people that I have been paying in the past to do this, they are very switched on. They're going to move. They're probably already moving into the next level of doing this stuff. I don't
Right.
worry about where they're going to land. Is it going to replace what they were doing? Yes. I can promise you they're going to move on. They're too good. They're
Right.
too good. But there is going to be a dislocation of people that won't. But what I can see is, as I do that, one of the things I mentioned to you was all weekend long, I was hitting limits, right? I had to up mine to the maximum level to
Right.
be able to make sure I wasn't hitting compute level limits and model level limits, which means that I'm employing more technology. I'm employing more resources, both in the model, compute, resources meaning electricity for the
Right.
models and so forth. When that grows, so do the jobs that are around every bit of that. So making sure you think about it in a macro way. I can say, I bet there are jobs for everybody that I'm going to displace, except for those that can't move to another thing, right? Either within that chain or doing something similar in another way. So I just don't see, as you and I've seen in most of the work we've seen when we look historically, you don't automatically dislocate uh, everybody that was
Right.
doing these kind of productivity jobs and say they're out of jobs. Are they out of a job? Yes. Now, have they transitioned to something? Maybe. I
Hmm.
think in all these things we've seen, and we see it again here, in all these things we've seen, this one in particular, you're probably going to have about the same percentage of people that are structurally unemployable for whatever that structural reason is in structural economics terms, structural economics in terms of structural unemployment. It's going to probably be the same. But we don't see any indication. Our instincts are telling us, let me say it that way. Our instincts are telling us working with this that it's not going to be any different than these other eras. And so this incredible fear of it's putting people out of work. Well, we think a lot of this is that they're using it to clean out people that it's a good excuse to do other things. Let me put it that way.
Correct. I see the term AI washing, and that's correct.
Yes. Yeah, washing. It's a good point.
Yeah. But oh, I think one of the points we're both making, although we haven't made it explicitly, is that this need for new personnel operates at the board level as well and the management team level as well. There's been a lot of conversation about people at entry level jobs, which may or may not be true. But I think that the people who at a board level cannot, at least to a fair degree, understand this and start thinking in the new way, may find that they're just out of step. They have nothing to contribute as a board member because they're not having the same conversations as the other board members are with the management team of the organization. And if, for example, my CMO, who regards herself as a creative type who doesn't do this tech stuff and refuses to start to tap into this data layer, well, that's a serious problem because marketing people need to be thoroughly attuned to what's happening in the marketplace across the marketplace. Needs to be able to diagnose problems in drops of sale by tapping into the AI layer, needs to be able to adjust programs, adjust thinking, adjust the work of the people who work under her by tapping into the data layer and so forth. So it's the people in those managerial roles, even at the C level, who may cause problems for entire divisions, which can't be allowed to happen. So that person may have to be someone who is encouraged to move on.
And that gets to a point that uh, I've spent a fair amount of time thinking about, as have you, because I cover it pretty extensively in this next book, which is instead the first book in the series is called Ahead of the Machine. It's about,
Right.
what does this world of AI mean to all of us? And then this one is about called Leading the Machine. It's how do you function as a leader
Right.
under this, and do you fit? That's the question, the answer. The question it's trying to help you figure out how to answer is, do you fit
Correct.
this? And you can see we're talking about what we think part of the requirement of being a leader in the future is that you have, as you said, Deirdre, 50% functional skill. You still have to have a functional skill. Now, that functional skill may look, deceptively like it's got a big component of work fluency in it, and it probably does. But then you have to have this work fluency, and that the difference is how do you participate in this? As a
Right.
board chair, it's how do you connect the institutional exchanges that are going on and making sure you're preserving that value of the institution and then all of the sub things you're responsible for. You may be responsible for an aspect, maybe it's a product focused aspect as opposed to a functional aspect.
Right.
And that has implications for the actual, what you and I would call the organizational structure. That you're
Correct.
not likely to have this functional organization structure the further you are able to develop this way of looking at the streams of value you're providing to the marketplace. And this is if you've ever heard, and one of the confusing things is that you may have heard Elon Musk say, well, I'm going to give you the infrastructure in micro hard so you can build pretty much any company and we'll provide you all everything, pretty much everything you need in micro hard. So you won't have to do a lot. You won't have to put together a lot of the thing. Well, he's thinking in terms of this value chain like thinking,
Right.
meaning you won't have to worry about the infrastructure or because we'll all be thinking horizontally. So now it's about how do you collect the right unique capabilities you need for doing what you're doing. And that takes your investment down, way down. And so there, your structure looks very different then. And I elucidate what that structure looks like in this book, where I talk about, okay, under that kind of condition, what does it look like
Right.
and why? And I even give examples of where it's actually being done that way now
Hmm.
by certain companies that have
Right.
figured this out. So so it's got future implications. Now, you could see that the really intuitive people sitting in your company, Deirdre, in your leadership team, not your company, but your leadership team as CEO, if they're really switched on, this will become a threat to them.
Yes.
They'll see it as a threat. Like you just said, CFO is going to see it as a threat right away, too. Wait a minute, I'm in charge of the numbers.
Right.
So don't start measuring this business based on other people's numbers. I control the numbers.
Right.
I mean, that's going to be, you have
Old
your hands full,
thinking.
dude. I'm glad it's you doing this,
Old
not me.
thinking. Yes.
Right. Uh, but, and we're joking about this, but it's a serious issue
Right.
that you do have to have, your systems have to still function, right? You need those transactions to function correctly in the
Right.
system because if they don't, then you really will have a mess on your hands. So you've got to have people that understand the function that's being done. It's just you don't necessarily have to run it that way.
Mhm.
And it doesn't have to carry all the way up until you get to the very highest levels of the company. That was the point we're making. And it will be a threat to those people. And overcoming that barrier is something you're only going to really see when you start truly using it in a company. And so, we know what I would now do practically, Deirdre, is that, and we'll do a podcast on this where we'll
Right.
go through and show you if we were doing a committee, and we'll pick a committee, and we haven't decided which one it'll be, but we'll pick one and we'll mock up data, we'll mock up a company, and we'll actually show you how you would do this in a committee
Right.
to begin introducing it to the people responsible for the oversight of your company.
Hmm.
So what would that practical first experience be? I talked about what I will do as chair of this board. The next committee meeting, I'm going to make sure that I run it the way I described it.
Right.
And I'll say, please come with your mind open, and we're going to do some new things here that we think will be enlightening for us as in our roles of oversight of this company.
Right.
So tell me how you practically, and I want to give you the final word on this. How would you practically do this, Deirdre?
My Monday morning meeting, get everyone into the room and say, let me show you how I would go about solving the problem of a new competitor has entered the marketplace and our market share is dropping. What's going on and how do we react? and I would take them through the 5-step process that we talked about, starting with research, interaction, context, synthesis, and finalizing to show how we would come up with an answer. And you made a comment earlier, Tom, that the people who are going to be interested in working in this way will themselves just start working that way. You can't do training the old-fashioned way of training by sitting everyone in a room and an instructor sits on the front and shows you stuff. You have to get the people working, solving their own issues, coming up with their own insights, and just developing the practice of turning to the machine and seeing what happens and turning the output into finalized product that puts you up in the value chain, using the AI insight layer to further your work.
So, Deirdre, you think that I am too tired to see the softball that you just put in the air for me to hit?
No, not at all, Tom. If you want to hit it, that's fine. If you want to wait for the next
This is,
video,
yeah,
we can address it
you
then.
think that I'm so sleep deprived that I have not seen the softball. So, as board chair, I have a responsibility to point this out. So, Deirdre, as CEO, why would you make up a problem? Why wouldn't you pick one that's real and use a real problem that you have that you're having that would lend itself to trying to get some insight that you wouldn't normally get? Why wouldn't you do that instead of showing them a problem that could happen?
The reason I might have is I don't want to put anyone on the spot
Do
right
you
now.
care?
I might care. But you're absolutely right. The other issue is that I might not be defining a real problem in the business accurately enough to come up with an example. You're absolutely right. We could try something. I could
Well,
start I could start by saying, look, the board asked me why market share is dropping here. You can see that in Q1 it was this, and Q2 it dropped to this. Let's use the technology to figure out what's going on here.
and I assume what you're talking about is there's a real example, right?
A
That
real
you're,
example.
yeah.
A real
So
example.
the other thing that you might do, and I realize that you have a tendency to be a little bit softer on this than I do, and for good reason. Um, why not pick someone who is more in the team, a problem that's related to somebody that's a little bit more attuned to using this, and maybe even co-opt them a little early to help you to go through and do it. So if it's a say it's and I know you said it may not be either the CFO or the C
MO,
MO,
but it
but
could be
maybe the
the
CTO
salesperson.
or somebody.
Yeah,
If there's something, and maybe it's not a problem, maybe it's an opportunity, but
right.
why not think about, Deirdre, shaping that example in a way that you find a friendly way to do it, but it's real,
Hmm.
so that they can see that they're actually working on something. And one of the ways you might do that is the reason I chose compensation was because it's always a hot issue, right? And it's
Yes,
always a comparing it to the marketplace and are we
right.
being fair and all this. Um, yeah, I would say if there's a similar kind of an issue in the business that you can see, maybe positive, it may be a negative issue, or it may be a neutral issue that is just something that doesn't have as much emotional grab to it. But it'd be really elucidate it to be able to get that outside information. You just may think about that because I think to your point about the in this world because of what the characteristics of this what we're talking about, it's best learned real.
It's best learned by working on something that applies. I was trying to pick an example that would apply to the company just so they can see things, but you're absolutely right. We could work on a real problem as well.
I might, I think just the fact that because you and I have done enough work with this at the highest levels of doing strategy, through problem solving, through just in this particular really segmented market, a messaging issue, right?
Right.
And then we find out, wait, there's now a competitive issue too,
Right.
which we're not sure is not going to help them actually.
Right.
Um, but I think being real helps, number one. Being relevant helps is probably a better way to say it. Being relevant to the company,
Right.
uh, and the fact that you are so fluent in it is really going to also be telling because the fact that you're not, you would expect them to be fluent in the productivity use of it, right? The non-complex use of it.
Correct. The process work. Yes.
Mhm. But when it gets into this more complex thinking and
Right.
horizontal thinking, we call it insight layer thinking
Right.
that connects in and out of the marketplace, inside and outside the company, both all ways, right? All the way back through suppliers and so forth. It puts a whole different view of the company in
Hmm.
place, sometimes
Yes.
positive, right? Example that we turned up on the thing we were doing for our friend is they have a pretty good rep in the marketplace. Right now, they knew that, and they get the stuff done. That's the hallmark of
Right.
his founder. He's a true New Yorker. He gets stuff done.
Right.
But they have a good reputation, and they know it, and it's part of their selling is that. But that also having that reputation, that institutional value, it also ends up being a competitive threat. And that was what they weren't seeing is the direction that they were looking at as an option. They're going right out and fighting people that would be hugely threatened by that. And that may
Right.
not be the easiest way to go ahead and do what they want to do. So I'm gonna not stop. I'm gonna let you have the last word. I'll let you close this down. But this is really important thinking change. It's a fundamental thinking change that has to do with the horizontal way of thinking versus vertical. It has to do with this concept, Deirdre, of value chain. And it has to do with this idea that we think this concept of work fluency, meaning understanding all of that and what it means to the organization and how your role, the role you're supposed to be playing as a leader, how that fits that.
Hmm.
And we think that it's a 50-50 world. The expertise you bring to the table, along with, and notice we really have changed it to it's not so much functional expertise, it's expertise along with this. And today it's functional. Whether it'll stay that way, who knows? But it will be an expertise of thinking along with the work fluency are
Correct.
the
And
keys.
then I'll just conclude by repeating a word I've used throughout these podcasts and used already today, that so much is tied to the mindset of the leader. Whether people are willing to adapt, whether people have a sense of how to adapt, whether people have the information in their mindset about what's going on in their marketplace with customers and competitors and in their industry and in business generally and so forth, to be able to understand the value of the AI insight layer, the value of defining the value chain across to be cross-functional like that, and then the willingness to use the tools to tap into this great new way of doing business. And with that, Tom, it's always a pleasure.
It's always a pleasure, Deirdre. So long.
So long for now.